It was March 15, 1881, when 3 city health inspectors walked through the Lower East Side of Manhattan. They expected to find the usual, dirty stairwells, sick tenants, and children coughing from the smoke-filled air. But that day, they got something else. Something no one could explain. A boy, 7-year-old Seamus O'Sullivan, who had never spoken a word in his life, suddenly broke his silence. He raised his trembling finger, pointed directly at his mother, and in a voice clear as glass said, "She hides 7 dead men in our house." The room froze. The inspectors, the tenants, everyone. Those words, 7 words from a boy who had been silent since birth, would set off one of the most horrifying discoveries the city had ever seen. What investigators found inside that boarding house on Hester Street would reveal a story of desperation, greed, and death. And at the center of it all, a mother, Bridget O'Sullivan, who would do anything to survive in America. Before we continue with the chilling story of Bridget and her silent son, make sure you subscribe to our channel for more dark historical mysteries. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode, and let us know in the comments what state or city you're listening from. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Life on Hester Street. The Lower East Side of Manhattan in 1881 was unlike anything most Americans can imagine today. Every block was packed with desperate immigrants, Irish, German, Italian, Jewish, and Eastern European. Families crammed into tiny apartments inside tenements that were falling apart. The smell of coal smoke, sweat, and sewage mixed in the air. Rats scurried through alleys. Disease spread like wildfire, killing children before they had a chance to grow. For many, New York was not the land of opportunity. It was the land of survival. Bridget O'Sullivan arrived from County Cork, Ireland, just 3 years earlier. Her husband, Declan, never even made it off the ship. He died of typhus during the Atlantic crossing. That left Bridget alone in America with a child who did not speak. She carried with her not just grief, but a heavy burden. Family back in Ireland depended on her to send money. Their lives hung on the coins she could earn in this new land. The only thing she could afford was a run-down brownstone at 47 Hester Street. It had once been a fine home before the Civil War, but by 1881 it was rotting. Bridget rented it from a landlord who didn't care about repairs. She quickly turned it into a boarding house. Every room was filled, beds crammed side by side. Men paid by the week, some even paying just 50 cents to sleep on straw in the basement. These men were strangers to the city, immigrants with no families, no connections, and no one to ask questions if they disappeared. It was the perfect place for Bridget's secret. The silent boy, Seamus O'Sullivan, was a strange child. He never laughed. He never cried. He never spoke. Neighbors whispered that he was cursed, or blessed, depending on their superstitions. But everyone agreed he had eyes that saw too much. Dark, watchful eyes that missed nothing. He moved silently through the boarding house, slipping in and out of rooms without being noticed. To the tenants, he was like a ghost child, always present but never truly there. But Seamus noticed everything, especially what his mother did at night. Bridget's transformation. People who knew Bridget back in Ireland remembered a gentle woman. She had once sung lullabies, helped neighbors give birth, and cared for the sick. But America had hardened her. Her voice was sharp now. Her clothes always neat, no matter how poor she was. She learned to speak English clearly, without her heavy Cork accent, because she knew it earned respect. Bridget's boarding house catered to a very specific kind of tenant, men who traveled alone. Men who carried their savings sewn into their coats. Men who had no family nearby to look for them if something happened. These men came with dreams. But in Bridget's eyes, they also came with opportunity. The first death. It began in November 1879. A farmer named Paddy Flanagan, 43 years old, arrived from Galway. He was sick, running a fever from his long journey. He paid for a bed in the basement and carried nearly $60 in gold coins, a small fortune for an immigrant. Paddy often showed the coins to other men, proudly talking about his dream of buying land in Pennsylvania. He was weak, but hopeful. Bridget cared for him personally. She brought him soup, medicine. She won his trust. And then, one evening, she gave him a cup of tea, her grandmother's special remedy, from Ireland, she said. Seamus, hidden in the shadows of the basement stairs, watched his mother carefully. He watched as Paddy drank every drop. 2 hours later, Paddy was writhing in agony, clutching his throat, his eyes bulging with silent screams. The other men panicked, thinking his fever had returned. But Bridget arrived calm, carrying fresh sheets and whispering prayers as she held Paddy's hand. To the tenants, she looked like an angel of mercy. Only Seamus saw the truth, his mother's hand slipping into Paddy's coat pocket, stealing the pouch of gold coins as the man took his last breaths. By morning, Paddy Flanagan was dead. The sub-basement. Bridget wasted no time. She told the tenants that Paddy had been buried at Calvary Cemetery in Queens, like so many Irish immigrants before him. But that was a lie. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Bridget dragged Paddy's body to a hidden door behind the furnace. Inside was a sub-basement, an old cold storage room no one else knew about. The stone walls were lined with quicklime. The air was cool, dry, perfect for hiding bodies. Bridget had found the place weeks earlier. Now, she put it to use. She wrapped Paddy's corpse in sheets, covered it with quicklime, and left him in the dark. For her, it wasn't murder. It was survival. Paddy was going to die anyway, she told herself. His money would do more good in her hands than buried in the ground. But Seamus saw. He saw everything. The pattern begins. Paddy Flanagan was only the first. Over the next 16 months, 6 more men would enter Bridget O'Sullivan's boarding house, and never leave. Seamus stayed silent, unable to speak the horrors he had witnessed. Until that one fateful day in March 1881, when 7 words finally escaped his lips. And those words would change everything. Fire. End of Part 1. To be continued in Part 2. The Silent Boy of Hester Street, Part 2. When one man dies in a crowded tenement, it's tragic. When 2 men die, it's suspicious. But when 7 men vanish under the same roof in just 16 months, it becomes something darker. And Seamus O'Sullivan, the boy who never spoke, witnessed all of it. The pattern of death. Every killing followed the same chilling pattern. A sick immigrant, often coughing or feverish, arrived with hope in his eyes and money sewn into his coat. Bridget O'Sullivan greeted him warmly, promising rest, food, and medicine. Within days, the man grew weaker. Then came Bridget's special tea. And finally, death, quiet, unquestioned, swallowed by the chaos of immigrant life. The first had been Paddy Flanagan. But he was only the beginning. The German clockmaker. In January of 1880, Bridget's second victim stepped through her door. Klaus Weber, a German clockmaker, carried nearly $80 sewn carefully into his coat lining. 20 years of savings from fixing. Gears and springs jingled softly with every step he took. Weber had a deep cough, worsened by the bitter New York winter. He seemed grateful for Bridget's attention, her soups, her whispered reassurances. One cold night, she brought him a steaming cup of tea. By morning, he was gone. Bridget told the tenants he had died of pneumonia. Nobody argued. After all, winter killed plenty of men. But Weber's life savings, gone. The Bavarian carpenter. Just 2 months later, in March of 1880, another man arrived, Heinrich Müller, a carpenter from Bavaria. He carried $45 in gold coins and a set of fine woodworking tools, the kind that could set up a new life in America. But Heinrich had a fever, likely from his Atlantic crossing. Bridget stepped in, caring for him as though he were family. When he suddenly worsened after drinking her remedy, no one questioned it. His death certificate listed consumption. The coins and tools vanished. His dreams of carpentry in America were buried in silence. The Italian stoneworker. Her next victim wasn't so easy. Antonio Benedetto, an Italian stoneworker, was healthy when he arrived. Strong, careful, suspicious by nature. He carried nearly $100 in different pockets, money he'd saved by selling his family's vineyard back in Italy. At first, Antonio refused Bridget's medicines. He didn't trust her. But when he developed stomach cramps and vomiting, other Italian tenants persuaded him to try her remedies. What none of them saw was Bridget slipping poison into his food before offering her cure. Antonio drank her tea. Hours later, he was gone. His money, pockets emptied. Only Seamus saw the full truth, watching silently from his hiding spots. The Undertaker's secret. By the summer of 1880, Bridget had perfected her routine. She rotated between 3 different undertakers, claiming she worked with charities that helped bury poor immigrants. She paid small fees to have the bodies handled quickly, no questions asked. The undertakers assumed the men were buried in potter's fields or given to medical schools. None of them suspected that the bodies were hidden much closer, beneath the very floorboards of 47 Hester Street. Meanwhile, Bridget kept meticulous records. She wrote down the names of tenants, the dates of their illnesses, and their natural deaths. To the Board of Health Inspectors, she looked like a model landlord, organized, caring, and cooperative. Her records were her shield. They hid the truth in plain sight. Seamus, the silent witness. As his mother's crimes piled up, Seamus changed. The boy who never spoke began to withdraw even more. His eyes grew darker, heavier, like those of an old man trapped in a child's body. Neighbors noticed strange behaviors. He arranged objects into neat patterns. He checked locks over and over. He spent hours staring at walls, as though he could see through them. One visiting physician, Dr. James Kellerman, grew concerned. He told Bridget that Seamus showed signs of trauma, that he needed special care. But Bridget brushed him off. "He's just a quiet child," she said. "He'll grow out of it." Privately, she knew the truth. Too much attention on Seamus could lead to questions she couldn't answer. The double kill. In October of 1880, Bridget grew bolder. 2 men died within just 2 weeks. The first was James Crawford, a Scottish textile worker. Strong, healthy, with $70 in savings. His sudden collapse shocked his Scottish friends in the neighborhood. The second was Eric Lindquist, a Swedish laborer known for his robust health. At first, he refused Bridget's food and medicine, preferring to buy his own. But when violent abdominal pain struck, he finally gave in. Within hours of drinking her tea, Eric was dead. This time, tenants whispered, 2 strong men, gone so suddenly. Whispers turned to suspicion. The man who noticed. Not everyone was fooled. Thomas Mackenzie, a Scottish stoneworker, began keeping quiet notes. He compared Bridget's boarding house to others nearby. Where most tenements lost 1 or 2 men a year, hers had lost 7 in just over 12 months. Mackenzie began asking questions. Why did so many die here? Why did Bridget always handle the burials herself? For the first time, Bridget's careful mask of respectability began to crack. And Seamus, the silent boy in the shadows, watched everything. He knew his mother's secret better than anyone. He carried it in his eyes, in his silence, in the way his tiny hands trembled when death came again. The shadow over Hester Street. By the end of 1880, Bridget had turned her boarding house into something far darker than a home for immigrants. It was a trap, a machine built to take in men, strip them of their wealth, and feed their bodies to the hidden sub-basement below. Seamus never spoke, but he watched, always watching, and in just a few short months, his silence would shatter. When the words finally came, they would condemn his own mother, and reveal one of the darkest secrets in New York's immigrant history. Fire. End of Part 2. To be continued in Part 3. Part 3. The Silent Witness. Hook. Imagine being only 7 years old, hiding in the walls of your own home, and watching your mother slowly poison strangers to death. You can't tell anyone. You can't run. You can only watch. That was the nightmare young Seamus O'Sullivan lived through inside the boarding house on Hester Street. And now, his mother's dark secrets were beginning to unravel in ways she never expected. Bridget O'Sullivan thought she had perfected her system. She knew who to target. Lonely men with money, no family in New York, and no one to ask questions if they suddenly vanished. For a while, it worked perfectly. But one man was watching her too closely, Alexander Mackenzie. Mackenzie was a Scottish immigrant, tough, healthy, and well-connected in his community. He noticed that too many men came to Bridget's boarding house and never left. He told neighbors what he suspected, but Bridget was clever. Instead of confronting him, she attacked his reputation. She whispered to other tenants that Mackenzie drank too much, that he hated the Irish, and that his suspicions were nothing more than prejudice and drunken rants. Soon, people rolled their eyes whenever Mackenzie warned them. Even the police brushed him off, treating his complaints like petty gossip. Bridget had silenced her most dangerous threat, at least for now. But someone else was watching far more closely than Mackenzie. Seamus had discovered something incredible about the old tenement building. Behind the walls and beneath the floors were hidden passages left by the original builders. To most, the house looked ordinary. But to Seamus, it became a secret fortress of hiding places. From these dark cracks and crawlspaces, the boy could spy on almost every room without being seen. He watched his mother carefully, learning her patterns. He noticed which tenants she smiled at, which ones she measured with her eyes, and which ones she eventually treated with her mysterious medicine. At first, Seamus didn't understand. But slowly, the truth sank in. His mother wasn't healing people, she was killing them. The knowledge twisted his young mind. He stopped sleeping in his bed, too afraid to close his eyes. Instead, he curled up in his hiding spots, trembling with nightmares even while awake. His little heart raced, his breath came shallow, and his hands shook whenever he heard his mother's footsteps in the hall. By the winter of 1880, Bridget faced a new problem. The New York City Health Department had announced detailed inspections of all tenement buildings. Inspectors would examine every corner, even the basements and sub-basements. Bridget panicked. She had been storing her victims' remains in secret places below the house. If officials searched down there, everything would be exposed. She began to make frantic plans. Could she burn the bodies in the furnace? Dissolve them with chemicals? Carry them away at night for burial? Each idea came with terrible risks. And all the while, Seamus watched in silence from the shadows, realizing just how dangerous his mother truly was. Then came the man who would change everything, Michael Donovan. He was a 48-year-old farmer from County Mayo, newly arrived with almost $150 in gold and cash. For Bridget, it was the largest fortune she had ever seen. But Donovan was different from her usual prey. He was healthy, suspicious, and had relatives in Boston waiting for him. If he disappeared, people would notice. Bridget knew this, yet greed clouded her judgment. That much money could change her life, support her family in Ireland, and maybe even allow her to start over somewhere else. She waited patiently, choosing her moment carefully. When a wave of sickness spread through the building, she saw her chance. Donovan began to feel ill, and despite his suspicion of remedies, he finally allowed Bridget to care for him. What he didn't know was that her cure was death itself. This time, Seamus was there, hidden behind the stairs in a dark alcove. He saw everything. He watched his mother measure out powders, stir them into liquid, and smile warmly as she handed the cup to Donovan. He watched the man drink, trusting her as if she were his own mother. And then, the horror began. Donovan's strong body fought desperately against the poison. He convulsed, gasped, and trembled for nearly an hour. His eyes bulged with awareness, silently begging Bridget for help, but she only stood by and waited for the end. For Seamus, it was the breaking point. He couldn't scream, couldn't cry. He just crouched frozen, watching a man die slowly before his eyes, knowing his own mother had caused it. After Donovan's death, Bridget began to unravel. Her once perfect mask of calm and order started to slip. She snapped at tenants one moment and smothered them with kindness the next. She stared too long at men, calculating their worth like cattle at market. The house grew dirty, dishes piled up, laundry went unwashed, and worst of all, she began making mistakes. She told one tenant Donovan had died of pneumonia. She told another it was a heart problem. She told Mackenzie that Donovan was buried at Calvary Cemetery, but a priest heard her say Woodlawn. People began whispering, sensing that something wasn't right. Mackenzie, though ridiculed, didn't give up. He wrote letters to charities and immigrant aid groups, asking if they had burial records of Bridget's dead tenants. The replies troubled him deeply. No records, no burials, no proof these men had ever died the way Bridget claimed. Meanwhile, the health inspections drew closer. Bridget had sent most of her stolen money back to Ireland, leaving her without enough funds to vanish and start over. She was trapped. Seamus, too, was trapped, inside his own mind. He had seen too much, held too many secrets. His childhood was gone, replaced by sleepless nights and silent terror. Then came March 15, 1881. The day dawned cold and gray as three inspectors, Drive, Samuel Hayes, Inspector Margaret Walsh, and Clerk Robert Chen, arrived at 47 Hester Street. They carried clipboards, measuring tools, and the full authority of the New York City Board of Health. Bridget had cleaned the house like mad for their visit, scrubbing every corner and rehearsing excuses. She locked Seamus upstairs, afraid his strange behavior might draw suspicion. She thought she was ready. But nothing could prepare her for what the inspectors were about to find. Outro call to action. The walls of 47 Hester Street are closing in. Bridget's lies are beginning to unravel, and Seamus is carrying more secrets than any child ever should. What will the inspectors discover in the shadows of that cursed boarding house? If this story has you hooked, hit that like button, share it with a friend who loves dark mysteries, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. The horror is only just beginning. Right finger, do you want me to also prepare part 4, the health inspection reveal, in the same style next? Part 4, the inspectors. Hook. 3 officials walk into a tenement building on Hester Street, thinking they're about to check sanitation and ventilation. What they don't know is that beneath their feet lie secrets of death and decay, secrets that could expose one of New York's earliest serial killers. This is the day everything began to unravel for Bridget O'Sullivan. March 15, 1881, was bitterly cold. A heavy wind whipped down the narrow alleys of the Lower East Side, carrying the smell of coal smoke and sewage. At precisely 9 o'clock, the inspectors arrived at number 47 Hester Street, Drive. Samuel Hayes, a stern physician in his 40s, Inspector Margaret Walsh, one of the few women working in the department, and Clerk Robert Chen, a young man with sharp eyes and a knack for details. They had been assigned to check the tenement for overcrowding, poor ventilation, and hidden dangers to public health. None of them suspected they were stepping into a house of death. Bridget was waiting at the door, all smiles and false warmth. She had spent days scrubbing the visible rooms, clearing away clutter, and rehearsing answers to every possible question. Her plan was simple: charm the inspectors, distract them, and hurry them along before they dug too deeply. "Good morning, sirs, and madam," she said with a polite bow. "You'll find my house clean and orderly. I take great pride in keeping my tenants safe." Dr. Hayes gave her a brisk nod. "We'll be the judge of that, Mrs. O'Sullivan. Please show us around." As they began their inspection, Seamus sat hidden upstairs, peeking through a crack in the wall. His mother had forbidden him from being near the officials, but the boy couldn't resist. His heart pounded as he watched strangers, real authority figures, walk through the halls. For the first time, Seamus felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they would see what he had seen. Maybe they would finally uncover the truth. But Bridget was clever. She guided the inspectors from room to room, answering their questions with calm confidence. "Yes, we've had illness, but nothing unusual for winter," she said. "Yes, I keep records of each tenant. Sadly, some have passed, but poverty and sickness take many in this neighborhood." Her tone was mournful, almost saintly. To the inspectors, she appeared as nothing more than a hard-working widow doing her best. Inspector Walsh, however, noticed small details Bridget had overlooked. Dust in the corners of rooms she claimed to have cleaned. Dishes piled in the kitchen sink. A faint chemical smell in the air, sharp and sour, like something used in tanneries. "Do you smell that?" Walsh whispered to Chen as they measured the windows. He nodded. "Acid. Strong, too." When Walsh asked Bridget about it, the widow laughed lightly. "Ah, you must mean the neighbors. There's a tannery just down the street, and the wind carries the stench right in here. Terrible nuisance, I assure you." Her answer was smooth, too smooth. Walsh made a note on her clipboard. The group moved to the cellar. Bridget's smile tightened. This was the most dangerous part of the inspection. She had worked all night to make the basement look ordinary. Barrels stacked neatly, coal for the furnace, tools lined against the wall. But what lay beneath, the hidden sub-basement, was the true nightmare. Dr. Hayes tapped on the damp stone walls with his cane. "These foundations are old, dangerous cracks. We may order repairs." Bridget forced a laugh. "It stood fine for 50 years, Doctor. A little damp, nothing more." Then Walsh noticed something strange. Along one wall, the dust on the floor was disturbed, as if something heavy had been dragged across it recently. She crouched, running her fingers across faint grooves in the dirt. "What's stored back here?" she asked. Bridget's voice wavered for the first time. "Oh, just old junk. Broken furniture. Nothing of interest." Walsh didn't look convinced. Upstairs, Seamus bit his lip until it bled. He knew exactly what was behind that wall. He had crawled through the hidden passages. He had seen the bundles, smelled the sickening rot masked by lime and chemicals. His whole body shook with the urge to scream, "Look there! Break it open!" But fear froze him in silence. If his mother caught him betraying her, what would she do? Clerk Chen, curious, leaned against the wall where Walsh had found the grooves. To his surprise, it gave slightly under his weight. Hollow. "There might be a storage chamber here," he said casually. Dr. Hayes frowned. "We'll need to note it. Could be unsafe." Bridget's face flushed. Her eyes darted from one inspector to the next, measuring how much they suspected. She stepped forward quickly. "Gentlemen, madam, you must understand, this is an old immigrant's house. Many odd corners, many useless spaces. I beg you not to waste your valuable time on meaningless rubble." Her charm was cracking, Walsh noticed. The inspectors decided to finish checking the upper floors before making a final decision about the basement. Bridget exhaled quietly, relief flooding her face. For now, her secrets were safe. But upstairs, more problems appeared. Tenants whispered to the inspectors as Bridget's back was turned. One man muttered that Bridget stared at him in ways that made him uneasy. A woman mentioned that several boarders had died here in just 2 years. "Always men, always with money," she added nervously. These whispers planted seeds of suspicion the inspectors could not ignore. By the time they finished, Drive, Hayes and his team had conflicting impressions. On the surface, Bridget O'Sullivan seemed like a devoted widow. But the inconsistencies, the smells, the strange wall in the basement, all of it gnawed at them. "We'll file a full report," Hayes told her. "You'll be hearing from the board soon." Bridget smiled stiffly, hands trembling just enough for Seamus to notice from his hiding place. "Of course, Doctor, I've nothing to hide." The inspectors left. The heavy door closed behind them. That night, Bridget paced the halls long after her tenants had gone to bed. Seamus watched her from the shadows, his little chest tight with fear. He knew what she was thinking. The inspectors had seen too much. She would have to act. The boy realized, with a sudden chill, that the danger wasn't just for strangers anymore. His mother's desperation was growing. If she felt cornered, what might she do, even to him? For the first time, Seamus wondered if he would survive the house on Hester Street. Outro call to action. The inspectors had come and gone, but their suspicions lingered. The cracks in Bridget's mask were widening, and Seamus knew the horror. Inside the house could not stay hidden forever. What will Bridget do to protect her deadly secret? And will her own son become the key to her downfall? If this story chilled you, hit like, share it with a friend who loves dark mysteries, and subscribe so you don't miss part 5. The nightmare is far from over. Right finger, do you want me to move forward with part 5, where Bridget tries to cover her tracks after the inspector's visit in the same chilling style. Part 5, the cover-up. Hook. What happens when a killer feels the walls closing in? For Bridget O'Sullivan, the health inspection at her boarding house wasn't just a routine check, it was a warning. The cracks in her mask were starting to show, and she knew one mistake could expose everything. But Bridget was not the kind of woman to surrender quietly. That evening, after the inspectors left number 47 Hester Street, the building felt different. The air was heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath. Tenants whispered about what the officials had asked, about the way Bridget's smile trembled when they mentioned the basement. Some wondered if she had secrets hidden in those damp walls. Bridget heard the whispers too. Her jaw tightened as she served stew at the dinner table, her eyes darting from face to face. She could sense suspicion growing, like mold creeping through old wood. Seamus, silent as always, watched her carefully. He could almost feel the storm building inside her. That night, long after the tenants had gone to bed, Bridget lit a lantern and descended into the basement. Seamus followed quietly, slipping into one of his hiding places behind the furnace. His mother paced in the shadows, her lantern throwing long, jagged shapes across the stone walls. She muttered to herself in a harsh whisper. They saw too much. The smell. The wall. Walsh was looking too closely. She knelt by the hidden door that led to the sub-basement. For years, this secret room had been her graveyard, her vault of horrors. Now it threatened to become her undoing. Bridget knew she had to act. The inspectors would file their report. If the Board of Health sent workers to repair the foundations or examine the walls, they would discover everything, every body, every crime. Her hands shook as she unlocked the concealed door and descended the narrow steps. Seamus could smell it even from his hiding place. The bitter stench of lime, the sickly sweet rot of buried flesh. Bridget gagged but forced herself to continue. She pulled back the burlap coverings and stared at what she had created. The bundled remains of 7 men, all stripped of their possessions, reduced to nameless, forgotten shapes. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. For the first time, the sight sickened even her. She needed to destroy the evidence. But how? Burning the bodies in the furnace would release a smell that every tenant in the building would notice. Dragging them out into the street was impossible. Too many eyes, too much risk. Her mind raced. Then, slowly, an idea formed. She remembered stories of hospitals dissolving bodies in strong acids, leaving nothing but liquid and ash. Perhaps she could do the same. But where would she find enough acid? Where would she find the time? Bridget sat in the dark, rocking back and forth, the lantern's flame trembling with her breath. Upstairs, Seamus curled into his hiding place, his stomach churning. He had seen the bodies before, but tonight they seemed more real, more threatening. His mother wasn't just a killer anymore. She was desperate, cornered, dangerous. He wondered, in the way only a child could, if the dead men's eyes were still watching. If their whispers filled the silence of the boarding house. That night, Seamus barely slept. He listened to his mother moving about until dawn, her footsteps restless, her mutters sharp as broken glass. The next morning, Bridget set her plan in motion. She visited local apothecaries, claiming she needed chemicals to clean and disinfect her boarding house. So many sick tenants, she said with feigned sorrow, I must keep the place healthy. Most shopkeepers believed her. One gave her carbolic acid, another offered lime powder. Slowly, she began gathering what she needed. Seamus watched with wide, terrified eyes as she carried the bottles and bags into the basement. He didn't fully understand what acid could do, but he knew it was meant to destroy. And he knew she wasn't finished killing. Meanwhile, Thomas Mackenzie, the Scottish stoneworker who had suspected her all along, continued his quiet investigation. He visited churches, charities, and hospitals, asking about the men who had vanished from number 47. Each time, he hit a wall. No burial records, no death certificates beyond the ones Bridget had arranged, no trace of the missing men. His suspicion hardened into certainty. Something evil lived in that house. But without proof, who would listen? By late March, Bridget had grown paranoid. She snapped at tenants over small things: dirty boots on the stairs, loud laughter in the hall. She hovered over anyone who coughed or sneezed, as if already judging whether they might make an easy victim. Her once perfect cover of kindness was unraveling. Even her appearance changed. Dark circles ringed her eyes. Her hair grew unkempt. She muttered when she thought no one was listening. The tenants began avoiding her gaze. Some considered leaving, but cheap rooms were hard to find in the crowded city. For now, they stayed, uneasy and watchful. Seamus's own fear had taken on a life of its own. He no longer played in the street. He no longer spoke at all. Instead, he hid in the shadows, his small body trembling whenever his mother descended into the basement with her lantern. One night, while Bridget was gone to purchase more chemicals, Seamus crept down into the forbidden sub-basement. He carried a tiny candle stub, the flame flickering weakly. The sight froze him. The bodies weren't hidden anymore. His mother had dragged them into the open, preparing them for whatever grim work she intended. Limbs twisted at unnatural angles, faces half decayed yet still eerily human. Seamus dropped his candle and fled in silence, his breath ragged. He was certain the dead were calling his name. At the end of March, word spread through the neighborhood: the Board of Health would be returning for a second, more thorough inspection. Bridget nearly collapsed when she heard. Her time was running out. That night, Seamus awoke to the sound of dragging. From his hiding place above the cellar stairs, he watched as his mother hauled one of the bodies toward the furnace. She poured acid over it, the liquid sizzling and smoking, filling the air with a choking stench. The sound of flesh dissolving into nothing seared itself into Seamus's memory forever. But Bridget didn't know her son was watching. She didn't know his small heart was breaking under the weight of secrets too heavy for a child to bear. The boy had seen too much. And deep down, he knew something terrible: if the inspectors didn't uncover the truth, it might fall to him. Outro call to action. The boarding house at Hester Street was now a place of nightmares. Bridget raced to cover her crimes, but every step only made her more unstable. And Seamus, her silent witness, was nearing his breaking point. What will happen when the inspectors return? Will Bridget destroy the evidence in time, or will her son's silence finally shatter? If this story sent a shiver down your spine, hit like, share it with a friend who loves dark history, and subscribe so you don't miss part 6 of this chilling tale. The worst is yet to come. Right finger, do you want me to continue with part 6 where the inspectors return and Bridget's secrets begin to unravel publicly in the same 1,000-word horror style? Part 6: The Inspectors Return. Hook. By April of 1881, whispers of sickness and strange deaths swirled through the Lower East Side. But when the New York City Board of Health returned to Hester Street, the truth they uncovered would prove far more disturbing than anything they expected. Bridget O'Sullivan thought she had time to erase her sins. She was wrong. The morning of April 10th was gray and damp. A cold drizzle slicked the cobblestones of Hester Street, and the crowded tenements looked darker than usual. Inside number 47, Bridget was already pacing. She knew the inspectors would arrive soon. Her hands trembled as she straightened ledgers, arranged papers, and scrubbed surfaces that were already raw from endless cleaning. She tried to make the house look respectable, but the smell of chemicals still clung to the air. Upstairs, tenants coughed and shuffled about. The sound of boots on creaking floors made Bridget flinch with every step. Seamus sat silently by the window, his pale face pressed against the glass. He didn't move, didn't speak, he only watched the street, waiting for the moment when officials would appear. At precisely 9 o'clock, 3 figures arrived. Dr. Samuel Hayes, tall and serious, carried his black doctor's bag. Inspector Margaret Walsh, sharp-eyed and determined, clutched her clipboard like a weapon. Beside them walked Clerk Robert Chen, quiet but methodical, his satchel stuffed with papers and forms. They greeted Bridget politely, but their expressions were cold. They had inspected dozens of tenements before, but something about number 47 unsettled them. Mrs. O'Sullivan, drive, Hayes said, adjusting his spectacles. We'll be conducting a full examination of your premises today. Every floor, every room, every cellar. Bridget forced a smile. Of course, Doctor. You'll find everything in order. I pride myself on running a clean house. But her voice cracked ever so slightly. The inspection began. They started with the upstairs rooms, where tenants eyed the inspectors nervously. Walsh took notes on overcrowding. 4 men to a single room, beds crammed so tightly there was barely space to walk. Chen counted windows and checked ventilation. Hayes examined sick tenants, asking questions about coughs, fevers, and sanitation. Bridget followed closely, hovering like a hawk. She answered questions before tenants could speak, downplaying illnesses, exaggerating her efforts. But the inspectors weren't easily swayed. Walsh scribbled furiously. Hayes frowned. Then they moved to the basement. The basement was damp and dim, the single lantern casting long shadows across stone walls. Smells of chemicals, Hayes muttered, sniffing the air. Carbolic acid. Bridget smiled stiffly. Yes, Doctor. I've been cleaning thoroughly, as you instructed. Disease spreads quickly if one is careless. Walsh crouched near the furnace, running her hand along the floor. Her fingertips came away white with powder. She rubbed it between her fingers, then looked up sharply. Quicklime, she said. Why would there be quicklime in a boarding house basement? Bridget's smile faltered. It keeps the place dry. Old Irish trick. Helps with mold. Walsh exchanged a glance with Hayes. Neither spoke, but their suspicion deepened. As they examined further, Seamus crept silently down the stairs. Hidden in the shadows, he watched. Everything. His small chest rose and fell quickly. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when someone might finally see the truth. The inspectors turned toward the furnace. Hayes tapped the metal side and frowned. Have you burned anything unusual here, Mrs. O'Sullivan? He asked. Just wood scraps and coal, Bridget replied quickly. What else would I burn? Hayes leaned closer, his nostrils flaring. The smell was faint but unmistakable, something acrid, like scorched flesh. His expression hardened. Then Walsh spotted it. A narrow line in the wall, a seam that suggested a hidden door. She ran her hand across the stone until her fingers found the edge. What's this? She asked sharply. Bridget froze. For one terrifying moment, the mask slipped from her face. Then she forced a laugh. Oh, that, just storage. Nothing interesting. Old coal room, sealed off years ago. But her voice was too quick, too thin. Open it, Walsh ordered. Bridget hesitated. Her hands twitched. She could feel sweat dripping down her back. It's locked, she said at last. I don't have the key. Chen stepped forward. We can have it opened. At that moment, Bridget snapped. Her calm mask shattered, replaced by wild desperation. You people come here with your questions, your accusations. Do you know what it takes to survive in this city? Do you have any idea what it costs to keep a roof over our heads? Her voice rose, sharp as a knife. Tenants upstairs stirred, their footsteps echoing above. Walsh stood firm. Mrs. O'Sullivan, if you cannot open this door, we will return with officers who can. For a long, tense silence, Bridget glared at them. Then, with trembling fingers, she pulled a small iron key from her apron. Seamus held his breath. Bridget unlocked the hidden door. The hinges groaned as it swung open. The inspectors raised their lanterns. The smell hit first. Even the lime couldn't mask it completely, the heavy, suffocating odor of decay. Hayes staggered back, covering his mouth. Walsh pressed a handkerchief to her face, her eyes widening. Inside the sub-basement, the outlines of bodies were visible beneath lime and burlap. Arms twisted, faces half-covered, bundles that could only be one thing, human remains. Chen dropped his pen. Dear God. Seamus, crouched in the shadows, felt his heart hammering. They had seen it. At last, they had seen it. Bridget lunged forward, blocking the doorway. No, she screamed. You don't understand. They were dying already. They had no one, no families, no futures. I only took what they didn't need anymore. Her voice cracked into madness. I saved my son. I saved us both. Would you have us starve? Would you have us die in the streets like dogs? The inspectors stared in horror. Hayes's voice was low but firm. Mrs. O'Sullivan, these are murders. Bridget's face twisted. Murders, she hissed. No, survival. Upstairs, tenants began gathering at the sound of shouting. Footsteps crowded the staircase. Thomas Mackenzie pushed his way through, his face pale but determined. When he saw the open door and the bundles inside, his suspicions were confirmed. He crossed himself, his voice trembling. I told you, he whispered. God forgive me, I told you. Bridget's eyes darted wildly, her back to the furnace, her hands gripping the lantern like a weapon. Seamus, hidden but watching, felt frozen between terror and relief. The truth was out, but what would his mother do now that her secret was revealed? Outro call to action. The horror inside number 47 was no longer hidden. Bridget O'Sullivan's vault of death stood open for all to see. But discovery was only the beginning, because Bridget was not finished fighting, and her son Seamus still carried the heaviest burden of all. What will happen when the law comes crashing down on Hester Street? Will Bridget surrender, or will she take desperate measures to silence the witnesses? If this story has you hooked, hit like, share it with a friend who loves dark mysteries, and subscribe so you don't miss part 7 of this chilling tale. The nightmare is far from over. Right finger, do you want me to make part 7 even darker, focusing on Bridget's spiral into violence and Seamus's breaking point as the police move in? Part 7, Bridget's last stand. Hook. The vault of death beneath number 47 Hester Street was no longer hidden. The inspectors had seen it, the tenants had seen it. Bridget O'Sullivan's mask had cracked wide open. But a cornered woman is the most dangerous kind, and Bridget was not finished yet. The silence after the discovery was heavy. The lantern light flickered against the basement walls, dancing over the white-shrouded bundles. The smell of lime and rot was thick, clinging to every breath. Inspector Walsh took a step back toward the stairs. Dr. Hayes, Clerk Chen, we must alert the police at once. But Bridget moved fast. She slammed the hidden door shut, throwing the iron bolt across it. Then she swung the lantern toward the furnace, her eyes blazing with madness. No one is leaving, she hissed. Not until you understand. Not until you hear me out. The tenants upstairs murmured, confused and frightened. Some crowded the basement steps, others peered nervously through the narrow doorway. Thomas Mackenzie pushed to the front, his voice sharp. Bridget, what have you done? You'll damn us all. Bridget glared up at him, her face twisted with rage. Damn us. We were damned already, Thomas. Starving in the streets, crawling with sickness. No one cared about us, no one but me. Her hand trembled as she held the lantern, its glass rattling. Seamus stood frozen in the shadows, his small frame trembling. He had never seen his mother look so terrifying. Dr. Hayes spoke calmly, his voice steady though his hands shook. Mrs. O'Sullivan, put the lantern down. Violence will not help you. The police will be merciful if you. Merciful. Bridget spat the word. They'll hang me like a dog. They'll send my boy to the orphanage. You think they'll let that happen? She raised the lantern higher, threatening to smash it against the furnace and set the basement ablaze. The room tensed, every breath sharp, every movement calculated. Walsh tried another approach. Her voice softened, almost pleading. Bridget, think of Seamus. Do you want him to watch you burn? Do you want him to live with this memory for the rest of his life? For a moment, Bridget's expression faltered. Her eyes flicked toward the corner where Seamus hid. He stared back at her, his eyes wide, filled not with fear, but with something deeper. Disappointment. That look struck harder than any inspector's words. Thomas Mackenzie seized the moment. He stepped forward, his voice heavy with sorrow. I warned you, Bridget. I told you the dead don't stay buried. You thought you could bury your sins under lime and ash, but they rose back up. And now they'll drag you down with them. The tenants murmured, crossing themselves, some whispering prayers. The atmosphere grew charged, as though the basement itself held its breath. Bridget's grip on the lantern tightened. Her voice cracked, breaking into hysteria. "You think I'm a monster?" she shrieked. "Every coin I took kept bread on this table. Every body I burned gave my son another chance at life. You call it murder, I call it sacrifice. Then, something unexpected happened. From the shadows, Seamus stepped forward. His small voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Ma, stop." Everyone turned. The boy's pale face was streaked with tears, his thin shoulders trembling, but his voice was steady. "I saw them," he whispered. "I saw what you did. I wanted to believe you were helping them. But you weren't. You were helping yourself." Bridget froze. Her lips trembled. "No, Seamus, I did it for you. Everything I did for you." Seamus shook his head, his eyes glistening. "I never asked you to kill for me. I just wanted you to be my mother." The words struck her like a hammer. The lantern slipped from Bridget's fingers, clattering to the floor. For a moment, it seemed the basement might burst into flames, but the glass miraculously held. The flame flickered weakly inside. Bridget collapsed to her knees, clutching her head, rocking back and forth. "I only wanted to keep you safe. I only wanted to keep you safe," she muttered over and over, her voice breaking. The inspectors exhaled in relief. Walsh gestured to Chen, who dashed up the stairs to fetch the police. Hayes knelt cautiously, prying the lantern from Bridget's limp hands. But the nightmare was not over. As Bridget rocked on the floor, she began to laugh. Low at first, then louder, echoing through the basement. "You fools," she whispered. "You think the dead stay in the ground just because you've seen them? No, they follow me. They whisper to me at night. They watch me even now." Her eyes darted toward the sealed vault. "They're still hungry." A chill swept through the basement. Some tenants backed away, muttering prayers. Even the inspectors felt their blood run cold. The heavy sound of boots echoed down the stairwell. 2 policemen entered, their uniforms dark against the lantern light. One carried shackles. "Mrs. O'Sullivan," the taller officer announced, "you are under arrest for multiple counts of murder and concealment of bodies. Stand and come quietly." Bridget did not resist. She rose slowly, her eyes hollow, her face pale as chalk. But as they clasped the irons around her wrists, she turned her gaze toward Seamus. Her voice was soft, almost tender. "Don't forget me, boy. Whatever they say, whatever they do, remember, I did it all for you." Seamus looked down, silent, his fists clenched at his sides. The police led Bridget up the stairs, her footsteps heavy against the wood. The tenants parted, whispering curses and prayers alike. Some spat at her feet, others crossed themselves as she passed. Seamus trailed behind, clutching the stair rail with one hand, his face pale. Thomas Mackenzie placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice low. "Stay strong, lad. Your burden is heavy, but it's not yours to carry alone." Seamus didn't reply. His eyes lingered on the basement door, on the horrors still sealed below. As Bridget was dragged out into the gray April morning, the drizzle still falling, a strange silence fell over Hester Street. But Seamus knew the silence would not last. He could almost hear the whispers already, voices rising from the vault, voices that would not be silenced by shackles, or courts, or gallows. The dead had been disturbed. And the dead never forget. Outro call to action. Bridget O'Sullivan has been taken away in chains, but the evil of Hester Street is far from buried. The bodies beneath number 47 still wait in their lime-soaked tomb, and Seamus's soul is marked by the sins of his mother. What happens when the trial begins? What horrors follow a boy who has seen too much? If this chapter gripped you, hit like, share this with a friend who loves dark history, and subscribe, because part 8 will drag us deeper into the nightmare. The dead are not finished with Seamus. Right finger, do you want part 8 to focus on Bridget's trial, historic horror in the courtroom, whispers of the dead haunting her, or on Seamus's haunting, the boy becoming the true center of the curse? Part 8, voices in the courtroom. Hook. They thought Bridget O'Sullivan's crimes would end with her arrest. They thought the courtroom would bring justice. But the dead don't care for judges or juries. And as Bridget's trial began, the whispers of her victims followed her into the chamber, making it clear, this horror was far from over. The arrest of Bridget O'Sullivan sent shockwaves through the immigrant community of New York. Newspapers called her the Widow of Hester Street and the tenement murderess. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse each day, eager for a glimpse of the pale, middle-aged woman accused of hiding a vault of bodies beneath her boarding house. But for Seamus, the trial was no spectacle. It was a nightmare he could not escape. The boy sat on a wooden bench in the courtroom, clutching his knees, his eyes darting from the jury to his mother in chains. Every time Bridget's gaze met his, her lips moved silently. He knew what she was saying. I did it for you. The prosecution wasted no time. Dr. Samuel Hayes testified first, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. He described the secret vault, the shrouded corpses, the chemical smells that choke the basement air. The evidence is undeniable, he declared. 7 men entered that house alive. None left it. Each was isolated, each was vulnerable, and each ended his days in Bridget O'Sullivan's care. The jury shifted uneasily. Some crossed themselves. Next came Inspector Walsh. She spoke of Bridget's false records, her contradictory stories about burials, and the fear among tenants. She targeted the lonely, the sick, and the forgotten, Walsh said firmly. Men whose absence would raise the fewest questions. This was no act of desperation. It was cold calculation. Bridget sat still, her face pale, but her eyes burned with defiance. Then Thomas Mackenzie took the stand. The Scottish immigrant spoke with a heavy voice, his words lined with grief. I tried to warn them, he said, looking toward the jury. I saw the pattern. Strong men came with money and hope. Within weeks, they were gone. And Bridget always had an explanation. Always a story that shifted with the wind. The prosecutor leaned closer. And what do you believe, Mr. Mackenzie? Mackenzie's voice dropped to a whisper. I believe she fed on them. Not with her mouth, but with her lies and poisons. She drained them until nothing was left but a name on her ledger and a body in her cellar. Gasps filled the courtroom. But then, the defense rose. Bridget's lawyer, a sharp-tongued man named Elias Carter, painted a different picture. He spoke of poverty, of disease, of overcrowded tenements where death was as common as rain. Are we to hang every woman who loses a boarder to sickness? He demanded. The city's cemeteries are filled with men who died nameless, without families to claim them. Bridget O'Sullivan is no monster. She is a scapegoat for a city that fails its poor. Some jurors nodded, others frowned. Then came the most haunting testimony of all. Seamus was called to the stand. The boy trembled as he climbed the wooden steps, his feet heavy, his heart hammering. He avoided looking at his mother. He avoided looking at anyone. The prosecutor bent down to his level. Seamus, did you ever see your mother with these men? Did you see what happened to them? The boy's lips quivered. His voice came out as a whisper. I saw. A silence fell. What did you see, lad? Seamus swallowed, his small hands clutching the rail. I saw her, mixing things. In bottles. I saw her give it to them when they were sick. I saw them fall asleep and never wake up. His voice cracked, tears spilling down his cheeks. And I saw her take them downstairs. I saw the door. I saw the lime. I smelled it. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel for order. Bridget's face twisted in pain. She cried out, no. He's lying. My boy would never betray me. But Seamus collapsed into sobs, covering his face. The jury had seen enough. Yet even as the trial seemed decided, something strange began to happen. Witnesses spoke of hearing faint echoes in the courtroom, low whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. The bailiffs dismissed it as drafts through the old wooden walls. But those closest to the evidence table swore they heard voices. They were calling names, one juror later said. Names of the dead. Donovan, Kelly, O'Rourke. Clear as if they were sitting right behind me. At night, court clerks reported finding their papers disturbed, as though unseen hands had shuffled through them. Candles burned lower than they should, shadows lengthened strangely. Even Elias Carter, Bridget's defense attorney, confessed to feeling uneasy. One evening he found her cell cold as ice, though the spring air outside was warm. And through it all, Bridget herself began to unravel. During the second week of the trial, she started muttering to herself. At first, it was prayers. Then, it was conversations. She spoke as though to invisible companions, answering questions no one else heard. One morning, as the court assembled, she suddenly screamed, "Stop looking at me! Stop staring with those eyes!" The jury recoiled. Some swore they saw shapes flicker in the shadows behind her, faces, gaunt and pale, eyes wide with accusation. By the time closing arguments arrived, the trial had ceased to be about mere law. It had become a battle of the living versus the dead. The prosecutor's final words rang through the chamber. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the question is not whether Bridget O'Sullivan killed these men. The evidence speaks clearly. The question is whether justice will silence their cries, or whether we will add our silence to hers. Choose wisely, for the dead are watching." Bridget's lawyer could only shake his head, his arguments drowned by the tide of fear and superstition that now filled the court. When the jury returned, the verdict was swift. Guilty. Guilty of murder in the first degree. The crowd outside roared. Some cheered, some wept, some prayed. Bridget slumped in her seat, her eyes hollow, her lips moving silently once again. But Seamus heard it. Even through the noise, he heard her whisper, "I did it for you." The judge banged his gavel and announced the sentence. Bridget O'Sullivan shall be taken to Sing Sing prison, and there, upon the appointed day, hanged by the neck until dead. The chamber erupted again, but amid the chaos, a chilling draft swept through the room. Several candles flickered out at once. And more than one person swore they heard the sound of laughter, low, bitter, and not of this world. Outro call to action. Bridget O'Sullivan has been condemned to die. But as the date of her execution draws near, the veil between the living and the dead grows thinner. And poor Seamus, trapped between loyalty to his mother and the horrors he witnessed, cannot escape the voices that now haunt him. If this story chills you, hit like, share it with someone who loves dark mysteries, and subscribe, because in part 9, we march toward the gallows. And sometimes, the dead don't wait for the rope to tighten before they claim what's theirs. Would you like part 9 to center more on Bridget's execution day at Sing Sing, historic horror at the gallows, or shift focus to Seamus's haunting, the curse following the boy after the trial? Part 9, the rope at Sing Sing. Hook. The trial was over. Bridget O'Sullivan, the widow of Hester Street, was sentenced to hang. But justice in 1881 was never clean. As her final day approached, whispers filled the prison walls, whispers of the dead she had buried, and whispers of a boy who could no longer bear the weight of his mother's sins. The journey from New York City to Sing Sing prison was short but unforgettable. Crowds lined the streets as guards escorted Bridget through the jeering masses. Some spat at her, shouting, "Murderess!" Others crossed themselves, fearing even to meet her eyes. Bridget walked with a strange calm, her face pale but composed. Shackles rattled at her wrists and ankles, but she carried herself like a woman heading to confession, not execution. Seamus, forbidden from approaching her, stood in the crowd, clutching Thomas Mackenzie's hand. The boy's hollow eyes never left his mother's figure. For all her crimes, she was still his mother. And for all his horror, he still longed to run to her. Sing Sing prison loomed like a fortress on the Hudson River. Built of gray stone, its walls rose high, its watchtowers staring like blind eyes over the valley. Inside, the air smelled of iron, mildew, and despair. Bridget was placed in the condemned cell, a narrow chamber lit by a single barred window. She was given a Bible, a rosary, and the comfort of a visiting priest. But those who guarded her reported strange things. At night, they heard her whispering, not to God, but to others, holding conversations with voices no one else could hear. Sometimes she laughed softly, other times she pleaded. "She's never alone," one guard muttered. "Even when the cell is empty, you can feel them in there with her." The newspapers feasted on every detail. Widow poisoner awaits the gallows, one headline read. Another claimed, she confesses in dreams, speaks to the dead. Reporters crowded the prison gates, sketch artists ready to capture the final scene. But behind the sensational headlines was Seamus, silent, pale, and slipping further into darkness. Mackenzie did his best to care for the boy, but Seamus barely spoke. He sat by the river for hours, staring at the water, whispering names no one else recognized. At last, the day arrived. June 17, 1881. The morning was heavy with fog, the Hudson shrouded in gray mist. Inside the prison yard, the gallows stood waiting, freshly built, its wooden frame towering, its rope coiled like a serpent ready to strike. Bridget dressed in black, the prison matron tied her hair back neatly. She accepted the rosary, kissed the crucifix, and asked for one final meal, oat bread and milk, simple and plain. She ate without appetite, her lips moving in silent prayer. When the guards came for her, she did not resist. The execution chamber was crowded. Officials, reporters, doctors, and witnesses filled the benches. The air buzzed with anticipation, like a theater before the curtain rose. Bridget was led to the platform. She climbed the wooden steps slowly, the shackles clinking with each movement. At the top, she turned to face the crowd. For a moment, silence fell. Then she spoke, her voice clear and steady. I never meant to harm, she said. I only sought to survive. But hunger makes monsters of us all. The priest whispered prayers beside her. The hangman adjusted the rope, sliding the noose over her neck. The coarse hemp scratched her skin. She did not flinch. But then something strange happened. Several witnesses swore they heard voices, low murmurs rising from the corners of the chamber. The sound grew louder, overlapping whispers, until the words became clear. Names. The names of the dead. Klaus Weber, Heinrich, Muller, Antonio Benedetto, Michael Donovan. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some crossed themselves, others stared wide-eyed at Bridget. She gasped, her composure cracking. Her eyes darted to the empty air, as if she saw them standing there. They're here, she whispered. They've come for me. The hangman tightened the knot. The warden gave the signal. The trapdoor creaked open. Bridget fell, then jerked violently as the rope snapped her neck. The sound echoed through the chamber, sharp and final. Her body swung gently, the rosary slipping from her hand and clattering on the platform. It should have ended there. But several witnesses swore they saw something impossible. As Bridget's body stilled, faint shapes appeared in the misty air, 7 pale figures, gaunt and hollow-eyed, gathering around the swaying corpse. The reporters called it hysteria, tricks of the mind. Yet more than one doctor left the chamber shaking, refusing to return. That night, the prison chaplain wrote in his journal. Greater than, I felt the presence of the dead. It was as though the rope released not only her life, but the lives she had stolen. And they were waiting. Bridget O'Sullivan was buried in an unmarked grave on prison grounds. No mourners came, no family claimed her body. The newspapers moved on to fresher scandals. But for Seamus, the horror was just beginning. He dreamed of his mother hanging, her eyes open, lips moving though no sound came out. He dreamed of the men, standing behind her, their skeletal hands reaching not for her, but for him. By day, he grew more withdrawn. At night, he wandered the streets, muttering to himself, scratching strange patterns into the dirt with sticks. Mackenzie tried to help, but the boy was slipping beyond reach. He carries the curse, an old Irish woman whispered when she saw him. The sins of the mother cling to the child. 1 week after the execution, Seamus disappeared. He was last seen walking along the Hudson River at dusk, staring into the water. Some believed he drowned himself. Others claimed he boarded a train north. But there were whispers that he returned to Hester Street. That he slipped back into the ruins of the boarding house, into the tunnels and passages he knew so well. And that there, in the darkness, he began speaking to his mother again. Outro call to action. Bridget O'Sullivan's body hung silent, but the curse she left behind was alive. And as her son vanished into the shadows, the city wondered, had the widow of Hester Street truly died, or had her spirit found a new vessel? If this story chills your spine, hit like, share it with a friend who loves haunted history, and subscribe. Because in part 10, the final chapter, we uncover the fate of Seamus, the boy who watched everything, and the man he became. Would you like part 10, the final, to reveal Seamus as a haunted victim cursed by his mother's crimes, or as a new predator who continues her dark legacy? Part 10, the Son of Shadows. Hook. Bridget O'Sullivan, the widow of Hester Street, swung from the gallows at Sing Sing prison. Her body was buried, her crimes recorded in newspapers, her soul condemned in whispers. But history did not end with her. Evil rarely dies, it passes on. And sometimes, it passes to blood. Seamus O'Sullivan vanished after his mother's execution. At first, people believed the boy drowned in the Hudson River. His shoes were found near the water's edge, and many assumed grief had driven him to despair. But those who knew Seamus, those who had seen the hollow look in his eyes, believed something else. They whispered that the boy had not died. He had gone into hiding. And the places he chose to hide were not the open streets, but the dark tunnels beneath New York City. In the 1880s, the underbelly of Manhattan was a maze. Abandoned sewers, forgotten cellars, half-dug subway tunnels, all connected like veins beneath the city. The poor and desperate sometimes lived there. Children scavenged, gangs hid, and shadows seemed to move of their own accord. It was here, people said, that Seamus was last seen. Years passed. The widow of Hester Street faded into legend. But strange deaths began to echo her methods. Men, immigrants, workers, lodgers, were found poisoned in their sleep. Their faces were twisted in agony, their tongues blackened, their bodies frail as if drained from within. At first, police dismissed it as accidents, bad food, spoiled drink, sickness. But soon, the patterns became too clear. Every victim had once lived near Hester Street. And every victim had, in some way, crossed paths with a boy who grew into a pale, silent man, thin as bone, eyes sunken, his face almost identical to the widow's. Thomas Mackenzie, the reporter who had followed Bridget's case, was now older, his hair streaked with gray. But when he read of these new deaths, his blood froze. He began his own investigation. He followed rumors through the Bowery, Chinatown, and the 5 Points. He spoke to street children, thieves, and beggars. And always, the same name surfaced in fearful whispers. The son of the widow. Some said he lived in the shadows. Others claimed he lured men with the promise of shelter, then fed them poisoned stew, just as his mother had done. And some swore he didn't kill for money, as Bridget once had. He killed for something darker, for the voices that haunted him, the same voices his mother had whispered to in her cell. One rainy evening, Mackenzie followed a trail to a half-collapsed boarding house near Hester Street, the very same place where Bridget had taken her first victims. Inside, the air was damp, thick with mold and rot. The walls sagged, the floors creaked. But deeper inside, the old kitchen remained. A pot still hung over the hearth, black with soot. And on the table lay a small vial of white powder. Arsenic. Mackenzie's heart pounded. He lit a lantern and called out, "Seamus, boy, if you're here." The lantern flickered. From the shadows, a voice replied. Not the voice of a boy, but of a man. Hoarse, broken, whispering as though it came from a grave. "You shouldn't have come here, Mr. Mackenzie." A figure emerged, tall, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and pale eyes that glowed in the lantern light. It was Seamus, but no longer the boy Mackenzie had once known. He was something else, something that had grown in the dark. What have you done?" Mackenzie asked, his voice trembling. "Your mother's curse, it ends with you. It must end." But Seamus only tilted his head, a strange smile curving his lips. "It never ends," he whispered. "She speaks to me still. They all do. The men she killed, the men I must finish. They won't rest until the city drowns in their hunger." Mackenzie tried to reason, but Seamus stepped closer. The air grew heavy, cold, filled with the faint stench of decay. The reporter realized then that this was no longer about crime or poverty. This was something supernatural. The widow's evil had not died with her. It had rooted itself inside her son, feeding, growing, commanding. Seamus was no longer just a man. He was the vessel of every spirit his mother had poisoned. Mackenzie fled that night, leaving the ruined boarding house behind. He tried to warn the authorities, but they laughed at him. Ghost stories, they said. You're chasing shadows. But the killings continued. Quiet, steady, merciless. And Seamus became a legend. Children whispered his name in alleys. Mothers warned their sons not to wander the streets at night. Sailors claimed to see him by the docks, watching with eyes that gleamed in the dark. The son of the widow had replaced the widow herself. 1889. Nearly a decade after Bridget's death, Mackenzie stood at her unmarked grave on Sing Sing grounds. The Hudson flowed quietly nearby, the wind cold against his skin. He set down a small wooden cross, carved by his own hand. I tried to end your story, he whispered. But your shadow lives on. As he turned to leave, he heard something, a child's laugh, faint but clear. He froze, his blood turning to ice. Slowly, he looked back. There, standing on the grave, was a figure. Tall, thin, dressed in black. The face pale, the eyes burning. Seamus. Or perhaps not Seamus at all, but something wearing his skin. Mackenzie stumbled back, heart pounding. The figure smiled, raised a hand in a slow wave, and then vanished into the mist. The widow of Hester Street had been hanged. Her body rotted in the ground. But her legacy lived on, through her son, through her victims, through the cursed whispers of New York itself. And some say, even now, if you walk Hester Street on a foggy night, you'll hear it. The creak of a rope. The laughter of a child. And the voice of a woman whispering, it never ends. Final outro call to action. The story of Bridget O'Sullivan and her son Seamus is one of New York's darkest legends, a tale where history and horror intertwine. Did Seamus truly continue her work, or was he only a ghost of the city's fears? Some mysteries are never solved. But if you've walked through these shadows with me to the very end, do one thing. Right finger like this video. Right finger share it with a friend who dares to hear the truth. Right finger subscribe for more haunted history, because every city, every street, hides a story just as dark as this one. And remember, evil never really dies. It only changes its name.